அங்கே ஃபுல்லாக பஞ்சத்தினால ஒன்றும் வேலைவாய்ப்பு அதிகமாக இல்லை. வேலைவாய்ப்பு அதிகமாக இருந்தால் அவங்க இருக்கலாம். எதுவுமே இல்லாதனால தான் வந்து.
Gajendran and his family are among the first batch of refugees to arrive in India from Sri Lanka. They were not fleeing war like many Sri Lankan Tamils did over a decade ago. Gajendran and several others who arrived on Tamil Nadu's shores this week were escaping from Sri Lanka's worst economic crisis. So, how bad is the situation in Sri Lanka? Why is it seeing such a crisis? And what is India doing to help its neighbour? Let me explain. But before I dive into that, I just want to quickly remind you that stories like this take a lot of time, effort and resources, which is why we can't continue to do this without your support. So do become a member of the News Minute today. The link is in the description below. And to ensure that you don't miss even a single episode of Let Me Explain, do subscribe to our YouTube channel. Sri Lanka is going through its worst economic meltdown since independence in 1948. So just how bad is it? The Sri Lankan army has been deployed at every petrol station to help distribute fuel. And this is after 2 men died while waiting in long queues for petrol and kerosene. There is a major shortage of fuel. And this has forced people to stand in line for hours at petrol stations. The fuel shortage has naturally been accompanied by skyrocketing prices. Over the weekend, the price of cooking gas was raised by one of the biggest companies in Sri Lanka by nearly 1,400 Sri Lankan rupees. So this means that cooking gas now costs 4,200 Sri Lankan rupees. That's roughly 1,100 Indian rupees. Fuel shortage also means power cuts, and Sri Lankans have been forced to endure daily power cuts which last up to 7 hours or more. That's not all. There is a shortage of medicines and milk powder. Your kitchen staples like rice and sugar are being rationed. Sri Lanka's retail inflation is one of the highest in Asia. It hit 17.5% in February. Food inflation has risen to over 25%. Just days ago, authorities were forced to cancel school exams for millions of children because they ran out of printing paper. You heard that right? They ran out of printing paper. This all-round suffering has led to protests by opposition groups and citizens who have placed the blame squarely on the Sri Lankan government. So, how did this economic crisis happen? I'm going to try and keep this very simple. Sri Lanka is heavily dependent on imports, including essentials like food, medicines and fuel. The country has a shortage of US dollars and as a result is struggling to pay for these imports. What Sri Lanka is facing is a balance of payments crisis, where it's importing a lot more than it's exporting. Last week, Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa said its projected export earnings is 12 billion US dollars. Its import bill is $22 billion. This means that Sri Lanka will have a trade deficit of $10 billion. The reason for this is that sectors that bring in dollars or foreign exchange have been badly hit due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Industries that drive Sri Lanka's economy, like tea, garments and spices, have been affected. Tourism, another sector that brings in foreign exchange, is struggling. There are other factors that have led to Sri Lanka's ongoing crisis. Low tax revenues. In 2019, Sri Lankan President Rajapaksa brought in large tax cuts. This resulted in a 30% reduction in Sri Lanka's tax revenues. Another reason is that Sri Lanka has seen its foreign direct investments nosedive in recent years. So, what is the Sri Lankan government doing? Sri Lanka will seek a bailout from the IMF or the International Monetary Fund. Until recently, the Sri Lankan government had resisted taking help from the IMF but decided to go forward amid rising public anger and protests. Sri Lanka has also turned to countries like China and India for help. India recently provided a $1 billion credit line to Sri Lanka to buy essentials like food and medicine. In fact, since the beginning of this year, India has provided financial assistance totaling $2.4 billion to Sri Lanka. And this includes a loan of $500 million to buy oil. While India offers aid to the Rajapaksa government, it must also take a humane approach regarding Sri Lankan citizens who are fleeing from economic misery. What issue or story would you like us to delve into in the next episode of Let Me Explain? Tell us in the comments. Also, if you've liked this video, don't forget to hit the like button and share this video with your friends.